What are your thoughts about neurodiverse people? Do you just not understand them and somewhat avoid them, or do you know how to identify a neurodiverse person and then choose to adapt to them? My hope is we can all learn together to identify and not categorize, but adapt to neurodiverse people. They need acceptance. They want us to accept them as they are. They just have a different way of processing information. But let's learn together how we can adapt to the neurodiverse. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Dr. Matthew Zakreski, Dr. Matt, for a third episode to address neurotypical and neurodiverse people. It is my perception we neurotypical people need to learn to adapt to and learn the, idiosyncrasies of the neurodiverse. It is incumbent on us to reach out to them. They have some very unique and very positive characteristics of which some people do not understand, and Dr. Matt helps us to understand better and relate with the neurodiverse people. Marty, what are some takeaways we can gain from Dr. Matt?
I enjoy Dr. Matt's podcast and his upbeat personality and smile and the energy he has. He made a statement when I said I would love for neurotypical people to understand the neurodiverse people. His statement was they can't until they've been in that situation or walked in the shoes of parents that have children or grandparents that have children that are neurodiverse. And it's so true. If you don't know, understand, then it's hard to relate to a different personality and a different way of thinking.
It's just a great opportunity for us to stimulate thinking, and when we are in the presence of a neurodiverse person, how can we immediately identify and then hopefully choose to adapt to them? Let's listen and learn together. Dr. Matt, it is great to have you back with us for, I believe this is the third episode. I want to be the first one to announce on this podcast two things that have just gotten started for you. Your most recent book on the neurodiversity playbook. It will be available, I believe it's November 9th of 2024, and available on Amazon for purchase. And Doctor, what a great opportunity to learn about you. It's just like having you right here in the room with us. And then the second thing is the podcast that you and Jake Noonan got started. It's interesting that you call it Noon Nerding Out on Neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Wow. It's Doctor, just great to have you back with us.
It's so great to talk to you guys. And I was checking my notes for all the podcasts I've been on. This is the first time first podcast I've ever done 3 times. So you
Wow.
guys this is new for me too. This is exciting. And I mean, honestly, I can tell both of you that part of the reason I thought I could do my own podcast is because of the really positive experiences I've had with you guys. Like, this feels so conversational. You guys make it so easy. And Jake, who's been in my ear to do a podcast forever, I was like, you know what? All right, buddy. I just talked to Ron and Marty again. I had a great time. Let's do it. Let's see if we can make our own version of this. I'll be the first to say on this podcast that when the time's right, we'd love to have you guys as guests with us, because I think that would be a lot of fun.
Well, Dr. Matt, Marty and I would just love it. I will tell you that, and our listeners, when we first got started podcasting, it's been November of this year be 3 years. And we thought, I think a podcast would be good to do. Well, how do you spell it? How do you do it? And boy, we are ranked rookies, albeit we've done maybe 450 or so. But Doctor, I want to be very complimentary to you as well, that it's these, I call it tabletop conversation. When we can have a tabletop conversation, that is one of the things I learned best through. I pick up on different things, and without going through a lot of history in my life, there was a time in my life early on I would never ask a question because I believed I was stupid. Now I'm making up for lost time. So thank you for working along with us.
Well, I mean, and we're all learning, and sometimes it's like the old line, like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? And sometimes the teacher is a person, and sometimes the teacher is a platform, right? And it's like, oh, I didn't know this was the thing I needed, really, because we didn't have podcasts 20 years ago, right? That this format didn't exist. And it's either you're going to somebody's lecture or you're watching a documentary on HBO. Now there's this perfect middle ground between the two of them, that you get the pocket Ron and Marty when you're going to the gym or driving to work. And I know that's when I listen to my podcast, right? When I'm driving to the airport and I'm like, ooh, what's next on my list, right? And it's great because it really does scratch our fundamental human need to learn and be engaged. And how great is that, right? I mean, it's a blessing to be able to learn more and share knowledge.
It is just great. Let me build on that, and I'm going to use our granddaughter as an example. I really don't think she would mind, but for our listeners, our granddaughter is high spectrum autistic, and I guess by that I would describe it as she's a little bit behind, who knows, 2-3 years behind in her maturity level. She, as of this recording, is 17 years old, and she's a very sociable person, and by some standards she's unplugged, unfiltered, and sometimes maybe has a little bit of a challenge to discern what is appropriate to say, but she is just largely unfiltered. Nothing that is vulgar, but it's just it maybe would have been better left unsaid than spoken. But where I'm going with this is she, like maybe some other neurodiverse people, love the iPad and so forth. She has, I would call acquaintances, but not very many friends. And so we as grandparents, I need to make sure our listeners know, we try not to overstep our bounds as grandparents, but we try to enforce parent rules in limiting the amount of time she spends on an iPad and so forth. And with AI and so forth, without monitoring, we don't know who may be influencing her and the like. Doctor, with that as background, We tried to limit her through her parents meaning parents' rules, maximum 4 hours total in a 24-hour period on any device.
Yep.
Our problem is we don't have an accurate time piece where we're saying, okay, you're at the 2 minute or 2 hour, 37-minute time point of your 4 hours. And she might, and we try to let her have the choice. Okay, you 4 hours. If you want to do it in one 4 hour continuous time, fine. But just know that you're done at the end of that, or you can space it out. And so, in the context of spacing it out, I feel as if we need a timer, something. I actually don't have a good way of controlling that. I apologize for a lot of backstory, but you probably have some recommendations for this, and I have reason to think that our granddaughter is not the only person who's this way.
I mean, this is probably the conversation I have most often with the people I work with, right? The question of screen time and how to limit it and how to manage it is probably the greatest challenge of this particular generation of parents and kids, right? Because I'm going to argue that I don't think you can be a kid or even a person in 2024 without a screen, right? I mean, like they get the homework on the computers, right? Not only do they have to type it on the computer, but like they have to go on Google Classroom to get the assignment in the first place, right? The research that they need is online. The YouTube videos that will support what they're trying to do is online. The problem with the computer, though, is that's also where the games are. That's also where Minecraft is and Roblox is and Steam and all the other things. My mentor, he said it's like if you put in the pantry the healthy food you need, but surrounded it by all the cookies and candy and chips. It's all in the same place. So when you go in to get the thing you need, you are visually distracted by all the other stuff that's there. And you guys have echoed a lot of what is considered to be the best practices here, which is not fighting with your kid about whether they get screens, because that's an unwinnable argument. They can legitimately say, I need screens, right? What you can do is say, you get this much of screen time every day. This is a guaranteed screen time, right? I don't care if you have set the house on fire, like you're going to get that screen time. The next best step is to incentivize extra screen time by having kids do the things we already want them to do. So if your granddaughter does her homework, if she does her chores, she can make it a la carte, a half hour for every other good thing we want her to do. In that scenario, you've created a win-win situation, right? She's motivated to get more screen time because she wants that. Her parents are motivated for her to do her homework, do her chores, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a way that you can do that. And what some families will do and say, you can earn up to another hour today, but if you do 90 minutes worth of good stuff, we're going to put that extra 30 minutes in the bank for you, right? So if there's a day where, maybe you didn't earn that extra time for whatever reason, you could reach into the bank and get that extra time. It's what it is that it's treating your child, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, as an entity with thoughts, feelings, values, likes, and dislikes. It honors their experience. It makes parenting transactional, not top down, right? And kids respond much better to that.
I appreciate what you just said. And I got to we are grandparents. I don't want to get in the way of parenting. And so we will offer that suggestion. Would you, parents, consider incentivizing your daughter, our granddaughter, and you do this and we can bank some more and so forth. And so then it's a matter of keeping track of that. And then I think one question I would ask you, doctor, is there an app that, let's just say on any given day, we agree, and I don't know if there is a magic maximum screen time for various people, but even if you earn more, maximum 4 hours on a 24-hour period, but is there an app that clocks every bit of that so that we don't have to put a stopwatch on her?
And that is exactly, yeah. So there are apps that do that. There are, programs you can download on the computer that shut off the Wi-Fi after 2 hours or whatever time you set them for. And and those things can be good because they take the onus off the parents or ourselves to remember. But I will say use them with caution because, you know, Ron and Marty, you guys are how old?
I am 77 and
I'm 79.
okay.
I'll tell you this, Marty. If I look that good when I'm 79, then I don't know what your secret is. We can do that on my podcast, right? Talk about your, skincare routine or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
okay.
Um, so, but so you guys are both in your 70s, and your granddaughter's parents are, I'm guessing, probably in their 40s, 50s.
They are our granddaughter, I mean our daughter is 54 as of this recording.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really true is that kids always know more about technology than we do.
Right.
I'm technology useless. Now, like I'm in a unique situation. My father-in-law is a technology expert. Like, the cloud, he wrote the cybersecurity for the cloud.
Oh,
He's that guy,
wow.
right? So I'm not going to need to worry about having good systems in our house because my father-in-law is just, code that make that happen. But most parents, their child's at the top of the technology pyramid, and we're all below them in that, right? And what parents tell me is like every program we get, my kid finds a workaround for. And it's like, yeah, your kid's not some hacking genius, but your kid is just more fluent with tech than we're ever going to be. So the problem with putting in systems rather than relationships is that systems can be broken. Relationships are bendable,
Yes.
right? So if I've given your granddaughter 2 hours of screen time and 2 hours comes up, I'm like, okay, sweetie, we're done with that. She's like, I want 5 more minutes, right? The program can be ignored or manipulated. The relationship she has with me, that's a thing, that's a bank we can either withdraw from or deposit into. Like maybe I'm like, we don't have to go anywhere for 20 minutes, but I do need you to leave in 20 minutes. I'm like, fine, sweetie, you get extra 20 minutes. I gotta go do some stuff, but when I come get you in 20 minutes, we're done. Thumbs up, we're having a conversation. Right. So it's a marriage of both of those things. It's a marriage of the systems and programs that raise the floor and make it easier for us, but also the relationships and the willingness to have open conversations about it. Um, one of my favorite things to talk about in this space is the idea of a third door solution, right? And us booking this podcast is a great example of this, right? You guys want me back on the podcast. I want to be back on the podcast. You guys have this much availability. I have this much availability. Based on those data, you said, here are the dates we can both do. We picked a date and now we're recording, right?
Yes.
You had said, Dr. Matt, you got to do it at this time or you can't be on the podcast. Then that creates an artificial you win or I lose situation, right? So people get defensive. They hold on to their thing, right? Kids are great, especially neurodivergent kids, are great at pulling us into zero-sum games. Either you win or I win. That's it. Those are the only two outcomes, right? I want more screen time. You want less screen time. Only one of us is going to leave the Thunderdome. But there's always a third door. There's always a third door solution. And that third door solution comes from places of respect and conversation, right? Your kiddo wants 3 hours screen time. You want them to have zero screen time. What's the middle ground? What's the compromise, right? And things like earning extra screen time is a way to honor both parts of that in a way that everybody can live with.
Thank you. And this is a great segue into a conversation I initiated with our granddaughter. It was a three-way, Marty, me, and granddaughter. And I said, it's ultimately your choice, when you want to have your 4 hours. But then the conversation evolved into my mom and dad always review. They look at the history, and that translates to they don't trust me. They parents don't trust me. And she is hoping that we would give her unsupervised screen time and so forth, and well, we're just skeptical that people with nefarious intent may be doing different things. But we had what I thought was a pretty good discussion, very meaningful, but it appears, and I'm not sure I'm discerning the correct cause and effect, but I think what ended up happening is I caused anxiety in her, and she pulled some eyelashes out. And so, doctor, I'm giving you that backstory to say that yes, I'd like to explore that third door, third opportunity, but I guess I'm just wondering the right way to enforce rules, but leave the decision to her. And yes, we do trust you, but we know there are people out there with nefarious intent. So that's where some of us are with this.
I want to say too, she's comes to our house because she can relax, and there are rules, but they're not quite like at home. And I think the phone or the conversation was, oh my gosh, this is home all over again.
It sounds like, yep, my restrictive home environment, and I'm trying to get away from that.
And she does have anxiety where she shaved some of her eyebrow. So we have an issue. Mom and daughter, bulkheads.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the reality of a situation like this is it is impossible to have an effective relationship parenting your kid without conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then you either become a doormat or an ATM, right? And it's not to say that your kids should get whatever they want, or you as the parent should get whatever you want, right? There's always a compromise. And it takes a fundamental shift to embrace those spaces, because when parents get stressed out and overwhelmed, we try to hold the line. We're like, you know what? No, like there's been too much TV that you're turning off the damn TV, right? Because we're stressed and we're guilty and we're overwhelmed. And the kids are like, if you just let me watch the TV, everybody would be happy, right? I call this the supervillain test. So, let's say like if your granddaughter was here right now, I'd be like, so if you were at home and you could do all the YouTube you wanted, right? Would that make you happy? She goes, of course, that would make me very happy. And does your mom and dad, do they know that that would make you happy? Yes, they do know that. Yes, very good. So if watching this thing would make you happy and your parents know that it would make you happy, your parents must have a pretty damn good reason for limiting that thing that would make you happy, because they either have a really good reason or they're a supervillain. And it's a way to engage that concrete thinking, the black and white thinking that neurodivergent kids can have, because it anticipates the argument of, well, they don't get it. I'm saying they must get it, because if I know what makes you happy and I'm not doing it anyway, then my reasons for doing that must be pretty solid, right? And I find that to be a really helpful way to reframe those conversations, to remind kids that it's never kids versus adults. It's kids and adults versus the problem, right? Because it's so easy to think it's me versus you. But it's never me versus you. It's us versus the problem. Whether the problem is too much junk food, too much screen time, not enough friendship, your curfew's too early, you don't want to go to college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? When we make it us versus our kids, we've already lost the argument, right? We've got to remind ourselves that we're always on our kids' side. Now, we can be on our kids' side and still disagree with them, right? But we're always on our kids' side.
Let me ask you this. Actually, the parents and grandparents in this case agree. What she watches is just brain dead, wasted time. YouTube videos of there seems to be little educational value in it. and you're just wasting your time in brain dead activity. That's our perception.
She also is on an app where she creates
Mhm.
characters, and she does a great job. I mean, her colors, everything is so she's doing that. And so we go, that's what we feel like is encouraging her in her sweet spot,
Yeah.
but not too much time with it, I guess. But
Now, let me
and
just
maybe I'm not
add,
making sense.
well, no, let me just add that a little bit. She can be very creative, but I think what happens is, and we don't over the shoulder monitor her, she'll be creative and then maybe gets to her time limit, or let's say she wants to do something a little bit different. Then she goes someplace else. We don't know where she goes on the screen time. So I don't know if it's something really nefarious on the screen time. It's, you know, I feel as if it's good to be aware of, but yet she feels at times you don't trust me. And that's where her problem comes.
Yeah. And one of the things to really reinforce there is that it's not that I don't trust you. It's I don't trust this unknown element to the internet.
Right
Right?
on.
Infinite open doors to infinite communities. And therefore, logically, some of them are good, some of them are neutral, and some of them are nefarious. But let's think about this a different way. Let's take the concept of the internet and put it at a party. Right? Would you like your granddaughter to go to a party someday?
In general, I would say yes. We would want to know who's there, what it's about, and some of the obvious
Absolutely,
things.
right? I mean, and it's just so funny because I was watching your face and you're like, I know the right answer, but it makes me anxious because of course it does, because there's that unknown element. For all you know, some knucklehead from two towns over is going to show up,
Right.
right? What's going to happen? But here's the interesting thing about raising kids in general, but especially neurodivergent kids. If nothing ever happens to them, then nothing will ever happen to them. It is so easy to say these things are unknown and dangerous and unpredictable, so I will protect you from them. But sooner or later, they're going to be in a situation where they have to navigate those things on their own. And if they haven't gotten the exposure and the repetition to those challenges, they're not going to have the skill set to navigate them when they are on their own. Now, I'm not saying throw your kid in the deep end of the pool and hope they can swim. But I'm also not saying because kids drown in pools, therefore you can't go swimming. You've got to find the middle ground, right? And at some point, you got to teach your kid to swim. And so the reason I use parties as an example is, right, parties are a social construct that that parents and grandparents get because parties have existed for as long as there have been kids, right? And I'm sure when you guys were raising your daughter, there were questions and arguments in y'all's home about, she's like, I just want to go hang out with the girls tonight. And like, will there be boys there? I don't know, maybe, which is kids speak for, of course there will be. Shut up, mom. Jeez.
Right.
Right. And y'all probably cross swords about that, just like your daughter's crossing swords with her daughter about internet, because the internet is kind of where the party is now. And so it's the sort of thing I would much rather have frank and open conversations with my kid about, hey, there's some really great things about the internet, like there are really great things about parties. There are also elements to these things that might not be dangerous, that might not have your best interest at heart. Here's how to recognize these things, here's how to get away from them, and here's to ask for help, right? When I was in seventh grade, I dressed up as a soccer hooligan for a friend's Halloween party. And as a joke, my dad gave me a big bottle of beer in a paper bag, right? Like, it's like people carry around. And I tousled my hair. I affected a bad British accent. And all like, oh, I'm gonna root for Newcastle. And it was a funny Halloween costume. And my dad pulled me aside before they drove me to the party. He goes, "Say, listen, I want to talk to you about this." He's like, "This friends that family that you're going to their house, they've been known to drink a lot. I know that their kids both drink. And he's like, so you might be in a situation tonight where somebody's going to crack that beer that you're bringing to the party and they're going to offer you a sip. And he's like, now, I obviously would prefer it if you didn't have beer when you're 13 years old. But if you do choose to drink this beer, here are things you can expect. And if you feel dangerous or unsafe, you can call me and this is how you reach me. And I remember thinking, like, even as like a complete jerkwad of a 13-year-old, because all 13-year-olds are jerkwads, like, I remember thinking, like, my dad must respect me at least a little bit if he's willing to have this conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the two extremes of that are there might be beer there, so you can't go, or do whatever you want. You're 13, you're not going to listen to me anyway. Right? So the authenticity of let's acknowledge the things that might happen at a party. Let's acknowledge some things that might happen at the internet. That's the way to honor your kid's experience, right? Because let's say, for argument's sake, your granddaughter's on the internet, right? In a chat room, and she strikes up a conversation with somebody. They jump on Discord, chat, and like, hey, can I see a picture of you?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's not sit here as mature adults and say that's not going to happen, because of course it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to have a conversation with her. How do you respond if someone asks for pictures of you? How do you respond if someone asks for pictures of you without your clothes on? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are not comfortable conversations to have with our kids, especially when it's our family. And yet, that kind of conversation honors the reality of being a kid in 2024 a lot more so than saying you can't go on the internet. Right?
I
And
appreciate very much what you're saying. Now, let me just ask you this, and here is what I'm going to reflect my concern that she has acquaintances, not friends, so she sometimes feels rejected. Might that want her to say, I just want others to accept me? Whatever you ask for, I will give you. I'll find it. I'll whatever. And I'm okay with let them make mistakes, not fatal mistakes, but learning mistakes. I'm an advocate of that. But I think where I'm going with this, doctor, is could someone say something to her that, wow, just stays planted in the brain and she is emotionally distraught over this. And maybe I'm thinking of something that just is not going to happen.
yeah. And maybe you are, but it's also a very realistic human concern. When you love somebody, you want them to be honored and have a positive experience. And you know that those aren't guaranteed things, right? One of my clients had to break up with her significant other this week, and it was a brutal conversation. And she was saying to me, she's like, I never should have dated him in the first place. I can't believe I pushed so hard to have my parents let me date, because all this led to was me breaking somebody's heart. And after a while, I was like, sweetie, like, you're going to date a lot of people in your life and you're going to get dumped and you're going to do the dumping, and you might cheat on somebody and they might cheat on you. And hopefully at some point you find the Marty to your Ron, and you end up happily ever after. But that's the only way to get those experiences is to have those experiences. Right.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you put yourself out there. There's a chance that they say no. There's a chance that you get your feelings hurt, end up lonely on a Friday night. And this is where the conversation we have to have with our kids has to be about two things. One, if a flower isn't blooming in the environment it's in, you don't change the flower, you change the greenhouse. Right? So if you keep knocking on these doors and they don't answer, you're knocking on the wrong doors. And we are going to help you, as the adults who love you, help you find the doors that are worth knocking on. Right? So that's the
Mhm.
first thing. The second thing is to make sure your kiddo has the skills to affect positive relationships when those doors open. Because social skills in particular, as most most people find social skills pretty easy. So they don't consider them as a thing to be taught. Like you just do it. You just talk to people, right? You just make friends. You just hang out with your bunkmates or your dorm mates or your bus mates or whatever it is. Hang out around the water cooler. It's like, how do you hang around the water cooler if you don't work in the office, right? So part of the reason I wrote my book is trying to operationalize social skills, how to take them for a neurodivergent perspective and be like, here are the things you can do to connect with other people, to take care of yourself while you connect with other people, to identify your values and identify people who are aligned with those values. If we make that stuff overt and intentional, what you see is people engage in it in a healthy way, right? So we find the right doors, we knock on those doors, and we make sure the kids have the skills to do well once those doors open, right? And that's how we support our kids much more in that supportive, proactive way than we do of making sure the bad things out there can't get them.
Yes, and I think I'm processing what you're saying, that in the way I'm thinking, there's nothing that's irrecoverable. In other words, there's no mistake that's so bad that you'll be adversely affected for the rest of your life. It's a permanent scar, so to speak, or something in your brain. But everything can become a teachable moment, and we learn from, we just move on and get beyond this. Am I oversimplifying this?
No, I think you're speaking to the core of it. And the best thing, the best piece of advice I could give anybody who is willing to embrace this idea of this is a learning experience and this is a thing that's going to come with highs and lows and pros and cons is the idea that helping someone in a challenging situation is about picking your time and place rather than jumping in to solve the problem, right? And it's funny when I talk about this at conferences and such, I always say like, "Where are my dads?" Right? Because it's always the dads. Like, dads, all right, I'm speaking directly to you. An upset kid is not a time for a capital L life lesson, right? You come home from work and your kid is sobbing on the kitchen table, and they're like, "I didn't make the field hockey team, Dad." And you know that if your kid had practiced more, they would have made the field hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
I say, dads, is that the time to say that? And the dads always look at me. They're like, the fact that you're asking the question makes me think the answer is no, but that's what I do, right? I'm like, well, you should have practiced, Johnny. Of course, Johnny should have practiced. And Johnny knows in his heart of hearts, he should have practiced more, but he didn't, right? So what we say is like, I always tell parents, think about supporting your kid. What can I do this hour, this day, this week, this month, this year? That's a way to frame helping your kid as not a one size fits all conversation, but as a process,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of times, the best way to support your kid if they have the heart broken or their friends ditch them or their boyfriend breaks up with them is not to solve the problem, is to take them out for ice cream, right? You know, I was very badly bullied in at the end of middle school, and there was one night where my dad just looked at me and he's like, let's go get some pancakes. New Jersey is famous for its diners, and diners are open 24 hours a day. They always have breakfast. So
Mm-hmm.
my dad and we went to the diner, we got pancakes, and we didn't talk about me being bullied. We didn't talk about how my friends ditched me. Those conversations had been had. That was well trod ground at that point. But I remember that feeling like such a powerful moment because it was like, instead of giving me yet another solution to try to make friends or save my relationships, let's just go get some pancakes, right? And just like we talked about with setting the limits around screen time, the most effective support we can give our kids always comes back down to relationships. Relationships are what we invest in, and that's where our best support comes from.
Fabulous. And I think what you're saying there is, and I'm processing it, if rather than tell them something, show them empathy, and maybe they'll even come to their own conclusion that, well, Dad, probably should have practiced a little more.
Yeah.
And yeah, son, daughter, I agree with you. But rather than come down hard on them in that emotional moment, yeah, let's just go somewhere so we can, yeah, emotionally work through this. I think that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. And and conclusions that we come to on our own are almost always more powerful than conclusions we get to somebody else gives them. People ask me all the time, like, well, people tell me all the time, like, I'd be a great therapist. I give great advice. I always sit there, I'm like, therapy's not about giving advice. Like, trust me, if it was easy, my job wouldn't exist,
Yep.
right? My job is to support people with empathy and compassion and help them draw their own conclusions. Because I can't tell you how often I'm sitting there and be like, I just need to tell this person to go to the gym or ask for a raise or X or Y or Z, right? But I'm like, well, what could you do about that? Like, what's our lesson here? What are the things you think we missed this time? When we ask those kind of questions, we force people to be introspective and connect the experience they have to the skills they have and maybe didn't use, right? I think that any effective relationship, whether it's parent to child or partner to partner or grandparent to child, teacher to student, whatever it is be curious, not furious, right? If you come home and your kid's sobbing, crying because that good for nothing boy from 2 towns over broke their heart, that's easy to be mad. I told you not to date that good for nothing boy. Or like, this is why we didn't want you to leave the seminary, or fill in your example here.
Mhm.
But honestly, it's like, wow, that really sucks. Like, I want to be curious about what you're going through. Like, tell me about what you're feeling right now. The time will come for anger, the time will come for problem solving. But the best thing we can offer the people we love when they're struggling is compassion, not solutions.
Yeah, I'm right on target with you, and I think and what I'm processing what you're saying is the art of asking open-ended questions, and there's nothing accusatory in the question, but it's just helping them think into and express themselves. Am I processing that correctly?
Absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head.
Wow. And I want our listeners to know open-ended question, closed-end question from my perspective is are you happy today? Yes, no. That's a closed-end question, as opposed to why are you happy today? And now I've got to explain why I'm happy. That's I say I have to. I'm asking you to explain why you're happy. So that's more than a yes no answer. That to me is the descriptive of the open end versus closed end kind of questions. And I think we need to be good active listeners. That I'm listening to what you're saying, but did I process what you're saying correctly, or maybe did I misunderstand you? And when we have this kind of an interactive dialogue, I think we have a better understanding with the person, and it's all about relationships. We are in radical agreement with that.
Yeah.
I
And
I would like to see uh, more more education or something where people could understand these children and know that it's just the way they think.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong with them. It's just the way they think.
yeah,
And I would like to see more emphasis on people, other people that want to shove them away and just put them in a closet. No, let's try and work with them and help them think through these things. But that's how I feel. Of course, I'm that way because I have a granddaughter that needs that kind of help.
yeah. Well, and you know, it's funny. This twing's a very particular story for me, and it's not my family story to tell, but so my in-laws, they had 4 sons, and the oldest son, who's actually the namesake of my son. So my wife's grandfather, his name was Sten. Her uncle's name was Sten, and then our son's name is Sten. Now, Sten, the uncle, he was a gay man in New York in the 80s, and he unfortunately contracted HIV, which turned into AIDS, and he did pass away. And his and his dad, grandfather Sten, was a sort of like one of those like naturally conservative middle-aged men. Like he was not he wasn't a cruel man, right? He just was conservative. Things are supposed to be one way. But when his son was like, I'm gay, he adapted. When his son was like, hey, I have HIV, and this was the 80s, right? Like when like no one knew what that meant and it was a death sentence and all these terrible things. Like, this guy stepped up and learned about the community and found ways to support and found ways to get medication. And it's the sort of thing like it's amazing how much people will grow and change when the circumstances of their lives dictate them to, right? Like you don't get dyslexia until you have a kid who's dyslexic. And then you're like, oh, wow, we need to understand these kids better. And part of the reason we do podcasts like this is not just to preach to the choir, right? Because the other parents who have kids who are neurodivergent, they listen to you guys and they're like, thank God Ron and Marty did another episode. I need some validation right now.
Mhm.
But so they can send that episode to their friend who's like, by the way, you've got a quirky kid. I think these people will help you because it is never too late to learn and grow. It's never too late to broaden our perspectives. And every time we do, it empowers us to have deeper, more effective relationships, which then turn around and make our lives richer, right? I didn't ever get to meet my wife's grandfather, but everything I've heard about the guy is that he became, it's almost like Scrooge, right? No one celebrated Christmas better than Ebenezer Scrooge once he learned what Christmas was all about. It said that, Sten became a better man, kinder, patient, more empathetic after he realized that like this thing that he had held dear had been challenged and he grew as a result of it. And growth is scary and growth is hard, right? But we have to parent the kids we have, not the kids we wanted to have, not the kids we wish we had. Just like I tell teachers, you got to teach the kids who walk through your door. And maybe they're hurt and maybe they're scared and maybe they don't want to be here. We got to find a way to teach them anyway.
Right on. Doctor, I'm going to bring this in for a landing, but I want to tell our listeners, I so resonate with the word empower. I want to encourage our listeners, look for, purchase, and bring home with you the Neurodiversity Playbook, available November 9th of 2024. Get the book. And if you have a neurodiverse child, do that. But even if we don't have a neurodiverse child, let's learn how to work with those who are so that we can understand and totally accept them. And that is a lot of what this podcast is about. Dr. Matt, gosh, just thank you so much for your heart, your work, and helping us understand how we can work with. And as I have said before, Marty and I both believe neurodiverse people are eminently employable. It's just a matter of finding the sweet spot. And let's integrate them into the workforce. Let's do not set them aside. And just because we don't understand them, we need to adapt to them. That is my perspective.
And I want to say, I hope there are parents that have the autistic child listen to this, because stats show that it's very tough on these parents, and sometimes they don't make it. They end up in a divorce.
Yeah.
And so they need to listen to you and to this podcast so that they know there's hope.
Well, I mean, and yeah, that could be our whole, if we ever do a fourth episode, we can talk about the effects this has on relationships. The divorce rates for parents of kids who are neurodivergent or special needs are astronomical.
All right.
That would be good.
Doctor, you just mentioned fourth episode. Let's do it. Would you
Let's
commit
do
to
it,
it right
right?
now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, would that? Yes, let's absolutely do it.
Let's focus on how moms, dads, grandparents, can work with and not have this be reason for a cause for separation of the family. And Marty and I want to do everything we can to keep marriages together, but working together toward the greater good of the people under our influence, that's the ultimate goal.
Well, that is a necessary conversation and one we should absolutely have.
Let's plan on that. Doctor, we will be back with you to schedule a date for a 4th episode, and I can see even well beyond that, many more, because everything that you discuss brings about some other ideas to discuss. Thank you so much for your work and your great help with all of us.
It's my great pleasure. You guys have an awesome day. It's always great talking to you.
And you do the same.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.